They want to make sure that they have their freedom and their privacy, and that not only are you not prompted every second to find a way to give them money. Hey, would you like Game Pass? Hey, would you like OneDrive? Hey, would you like to upload your typing data? All sorts of that type of stuff people are looking to just get away from because it's just annoying.
Your computer is supposed to work for you, not against you, not for Microsoft's quarterly earnings targets, not as a surveillance tool dressed up in a sleek interface. Yours. But something seismic is happening right now that is permanently rewriting the rules of personal computing.
Last couple of Windows updates have broken basic Windows features.
Yeah, everyone knows that Windows 11 comes with a big pile of bloat.
And the shockwaves have grown so powerful that even the companies that built Microsoft's empire are publicly walking away from it. Bill Gates is watching a controlled detonation tear through everything he spent 4 decades building. Windows 11's backlash has crossed from user frustration into corporate revolt, and the numbers coming out of boardrooms and quarterly earnings calls are painting a picture that Microsoft's executives cannot spin their way out of. This isn't Reddit threads and Twitter complaints anymore. This is billion-dollar corporations standing in front of Wall Street investors and announcing they are reducing their dependence on Windows. That's a different category of crisis entirely. Let's start with the number that should have set off every alarm inside Microsoft's headquarters. 1 billion. 1 billion PCs are still running Windows 10. Not because users forgot to upgrade. Not because they missed a notification, because they looked at Windows 11, calculated what it demanded versus what it delivered, and decided the answer was no. But here's what makes that number even more devastating. 500 million of those machines are fully capable of running Windows 11 right now. They have the TPM 2.0 security chip. They have modern processors. They meet every single requirement Microsoft published. Their owners simply refuse to use the software. When 500 million capable, compatible computers stay on an older operating system by deliberate choice, you're not dealing with a technical barrier. You're dealing with a verdict. Dell's own internal data confirmed what Microsoft was desperately trying to conceal. Windows 11 adoption is running 10 to 12 percentage points behind where Windows 10 was at the exact same stage in its life cycle. Windows 10 had its own rocky launch and recovered to become the dominant operating system of its era. Windows 11 isn't recovering. It's falling further behind despite Microsoft deploying every tool at its disposal. Aggressive upgrade prompts, hardware partner coordination, relentless marketing spend. Nothing is closing the gap. And when users choose to run an unsupported operating system rather than upgrade to your flagship product, you haven't just lost a software battle. You've lost the trust that operating systems run on. This rejection has now become something historians will reference. The largest measurable user revolt against an operating system in the history of personal computing. Not hyperbole. Mathematical reality backed by market share data and hardware partner sales figures. And then Microsoft handed their partners the perfect justification to leave. In November 2025, Microsoft's Windows president stood before cameras and announced the company's vision for the future. An agentic operating system where artificial intelligence is woven into everything. Your desktop, your files, your applications, your workflow. Always present, always analyzing, always suggesting, always watching. The reaction was instantaneous and overwhelming. The announcement video accumulated 700,000 views within hours, and the comments section became a wall of raw hostility from users who had reached their limit. Microsoft tried to contain it by locking replies. The anger simply spread to every adjacent platform. Twitter erupted. Reddit dismantled the vision piece by piece. YouTube creators produced response after response. Tech communities that had tolerated previous missteps reached a unified breaking point. And at the center of that breaking point sat Recall, the AI feature that captures continuous screenshots of everything you do on your computer, every document you open, every website you visit, every password field you interact with, every private conversation, all recorded, all indexed, all stored locally with Microsoft's assurance that it was completely safe. Users understood exactly what Recall represented the moment they heard the description. Professionals handling confidential information. Lawyers, doctors, accountants, financial advisors, executives recognized immediately that this feature transformed Windows 11 into a professional liability. Medical records, legal strategy documents, financial account credentials, proprietary business intelligence, all captured in a searchable database sitting on a local drive. One malware infection, one unauthorized access, one security vulnerability, and everything gets exposed. Security researchers verified the nightmare was real within hours of the preview build releasing. They located the folder where Recall stored its data and discovered it was completely unencrypted and accessible to any application running under the user's account. Microsoft had built a surveillance database and left it wide open. Passwords, financial data, private messages, sitting in plain text, accessible to any malicious software that managed to execute. Microsoft delayed recall, redesigned the rollout, restricted availability to the Windows Insider program, rewrote the security architecture messaging, added opt-in requirements, extended the preview period indefinitely. When a flagship feature requires that many emergency reversals before it even officially launches, the market doesn't read that as caution. It reads it as fundamental instability. Hardware partners watched this entire catastrophe unfold while simultaneously tracking their own sales data. They saw customers furious. They saw Microsoft doubling down instead of listening. They made their calculations, and then they acted in ways that shocked even industry veterans who thought they'd seen everything. Lenovo's chief financial officer delivered the most consequential statement in the company's history on a quarterly earnings call in early 2026. She didn't soften the language or bury the message in corporate hedging. The statement was direct. Lenovo was actively reducing its dependence on Windows-based revenue streams. Customer demand for non-Windows devices had increased 340% year-over-year. Lenovo was responding to market reality. Wall Street processed that number, 340% growth in demand for non-Windows products from Microsoft's second-largest hardware partner, and immediately demanded details. The details were stunning. Lenovo was in advanced discussions with Canonical, Red Hat, and Google, not for niche developer products positioned as specialty items for technical users, for mainstream consumer laptops, for business desktops, for their entire product portfolio. Linux and Chrome OS as equal options to Windows across the lineup. When an analyst asked directly whether Lenovo was abandoning Microsoft, the CFO's response became one of the most quoted statements in the tech industry that year. Microsoft abandoned customers with Windows 11. We're simply following our customers wherever they go, and they're leaving Windows. Lenovo stock jumped 7% that day. Microsoft dropped 4%. The market had spoken with precise clarity about which direction represented the future. Dell moved without fanfare but with even greater symbolic weight. Dell's homepage quietly received a redesign that sent a message louder than any press release. Visitors to the site found Linux laptops displayed at identical visual prominence to Windows laptops. Ubuntu and Fedora logos positioned directly alongside the Windows logo. Front page equal placement. Linux wasn't an alternative category buried in a drop-down menu. It was co-primary. But product placement was just the surface. The real story was production allocation. Dell committed 30% of its second quarter 2026 laptop manufacturing capacity to Linux pre-installed systems. That's not a pilot program. That's not a market test. That's a strategic bet that required supply chain commitments, inventory forecasting, and manufacturing line adjustments. Companies don't make those commitments unless the data is overwhelming. The data was overwhelming. Dell's internal survey found that 43% of potential customers would definitely or probably purchase a Linux laptop if it cost less than the Windows equivalent. Dell launched the Ubuntu XPS 13 at $120 below the comparable Windows version. First-month projections called for 8,000 units. Actual sales reached 23,000 units. Dell underestimated demand by 188%. The return rate comparison buried any remaining argument Microsoft could make. Windows 11 laptops were coming back to Dell at 26%, Ubuntu laptops at 4%. Customers were keeping Linux machines and returning Windows machines at 6 times the rate. Customer satisfaction scores aligned perfectly with those numbers. Linux models averaging 4.8 stars while Windows models sat at 3.1. When Microsoft executives called Dell privately to request the Linux offerings be downplayed, Dell refused. Michael Dell went on camera and stated the position without ambiguity. We build what customers want to buy. Customers want Linux. They're voting with their wallets. The money is moving away from Windows, and we follow the money. ASUS made an announcement that reframed the entire consumer laptop market. In January 2026, the company declared it was becoming the world's largest Chromebook manufacturer, shifting 40% of consumer laptop production from Windows to Chrome OS. They projected selling 8.2 million Chromebooks in 2026, up from 2.1 million the previous year, a 290% production increase representing a fundamental restructuring of the company's business. The product they launched to anchor this strategy was deliberately provocative. The Chromebook Plus Pro was an $899 premium machine with an OLED display, 16 GB of RAM, and flagship construction quality. This wasn't a budget device positioned as a cheap alternative to Windows. This was a direct challenge on premium territory. The marketing made the confrontation explicit. Everything you do in Windows, do it faster in Chrome OS. No forced updates, no advertisements, no AI interruptions. Sales exceeded projections by 340%. ASUS couldn't keep them in stock. Best Buy locations across 15 cities sold out within 48 hours of launch. The demand wasn't hypothetical consumer preference expressed in surveys. It was real purchasing behavior happening at premium price points, where Windows had always dominated. Asus's chairman summarized the strategic shift with language that would have been unthinkable from a major Windows hardware partner just 2 years earlier. Our future is diversified operating systems. Windows will remain part of our portfolio, but it will not dominate. Customer preference has shifted, and we are shifting with it. HP Enterprise dismantled Microsoft's last reliable fortress. Corporate IT departments were supposed to be immune to this kind of disruption. Enterprise customers don't change operating systems casually. The retraining costs are real. Migration risks productivity. Institutional inertia is powerful. Microsoft had always counted on enterprise relationships as the floor that would hold even when consumer sentiment turned negative. HP shattered that floor entirely. HP's initiative was simple and devastating in its directness. Every EliteBook and ZBook HP's enterprise laptop lines would now ship with Ubuntu LTS as the recommended default. Windows was available on request. The operating system that had been the automatic default for every business laptop HP shipped for decades was now the special order option. Linux was the standard. The sales pitch HP's enterprise team brought to corporate IT directors was backed by hard financial data that left no room for interpretation. A 400-employee company switching from Windows to Ubuntu saves $127,000 annually. A 200-employee manufacturing firm reported 18% productivity gains after completing migration. Help desk volume dropped 60%. These weren't theoretical projections. They were documented results from completed deployments. HP's enterprise Linux sales in the first quarter of 2026 hit 67,000 units, up from 8,900 in the same quarter of 2025. That's 653% growth in corporate Linux adoption. Law firms were buying Linux. Healthcare providers were buying Linux. Manufacturing companies were buying Linux. The applications that actually drive business work, email, CRM, accounting, project management, run in browsers or as cloud-hosted services. They don't require Windows. They never actually required Windows. Companies had just been running Windows out of decades of habit, and HP broke that habit with documented proof that the alternative worked better and cost less. Meanwhile, Windows 11 itself continued delivering exactly the kind of product quality that justified every defection. Over 20 major update failures shipped to production throughout 2025. Updates that disabled printers across entire organizations. Updates that disconnected network drives without warning. Updates that crashed applications on startup. Updates that eliminated audio output entirely. These weren't edge cases affecting unusual system configurations. These were widespread failures hitting millions of users on standard hardware. The monthly pattern became entirely predictable. Patch Tuesday would arrive. Something significant would break. Microsoft would scramble to issue emergency fixes. The next month, something different would break. Users watching this cycle repeat month after month stopped thinking of Windows as a foundation they could depend on, and started thinking of it as a liability they had to manage. Basic applications became unreliable. Users reported Notepad throwing error messages claiming the app wasn't available for their account. Calculators stopped launching. Outlook froze consistently after specific update combinations. The operating system that businesses and professionals had trusted for decades with their most critical workflows was now the thing standing between them and getting work done. Windows stopped being the reliable tool underneath everything and became the unpredictable obstacle preventing everything. The gaming community, Microsoft's last truly loyal demographic, the users who had genuinely needed Windows for decades, began migrating as well. Valve's Steam Deck had launched in 2022, running Linux. By December 2025, it had sold over 3 million units, and it played Windows games through Proton compatibility with remarkable effectiveness. 3 million gamers discovered through direct personal experience that Linux gaming worked. Many discovered their games ran better on Linux than on Windows. Better frame rates, less stuttering, more consistent performance. 3 million people who had required Windows for gaming now didn't. The Linux gaming subreddit grew from 180,000 members in 2022 to 890,000 by January 2026. Valve normalized the idea that Windows wasn't necessary for gaming and gave it to Microsoft's stickiest users. Gartner's projections synthesized everything into a single number that redefined the conversation entirely. Windows market share was projected to drop below 50% by October 2026, Linux at 19%, Chrome OS at 9%, Mac at 22%. Windows dropping below majority share isn't a bad quarter. It's the end of a monopoly. And this particular monopoly wouldn't be ending because of regulatory intervention or a superior competitor emerging overnight. It would be ending because the customers who built it decided they were finished. The companies that sold Windows to the world, the hardware manufacturers who put Microsoft software on every machine they shipped for 40 years, who built their entire businesses around the Windows ecosystem, who made Bill Gates' vision the default experience for 1 billion people, have made their calculations. They looked at what Windows 11 did to customer satisfaction scores, to return rates, to support costs, to enterprise deployment complexity. They looked at what alternatives now offered, and they chose differently. Bill Gates built Windows on a principle that software exists to serve the people using it. Windows 11 operates on the opposite principle, that users exist to serve the software's business objectives. That inversion destroyed the trust that every hardware partnership, every enterprise deployment, and every consumer purchase was built on. When the companies that constructed Microsoft's empire are now the ones accelerating its dismantling, the question stops being whether Windows can recover and starts being something far more fundamental. When the partners who built you walk away, when the customers who sustained you for decades actively search for exits, when the platform you created to empower people becomes the thing people need protection from, what exactly is left of the legacy? The answer is forming in real time in quarterly earnings calls, on retail shelves, in corporate IT procurement decisions, and in the purchasing choices of hundreds of millions of people who are quietly, methodically, and permanently voting with their wallets. Bill Gates built the most successful software platform in history. Windows 11 may be the thing that ends it. And the most devastating part? Microsoft is doing this to themselves. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Are you staying on Windows, or have you already made the switch? Because based on everything we've just covered, you wouldn't be alone.